should we aspire? Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda. The passage this week is from the Gospel of St. Matthew, chapter 5. I say unto you, that except your righteousness shall exceed the righteousness of the scribes and Pharisees, ye shall in no case enter into the kingdom of heaven. The easiest explanation of these words is that they were spoken in criticism of the scribes and Pharisees, particularly since Jesus was often verbally attacked by them and stood up to them fearlessly. However, it wouldn't have been much of a challenge to the disciples who aspired to spiritual perfection to tell them, don't be like those who lack any such aspiration. Jesus, in fact, says only a few verses later, be ye therefore perfect, even as your Father which is in heaven is perfect. What Jesus was referring to here then was the self-righteousness of the priests. Don't seek perfection, he was saying to his disciples, in the image you project toward others. Don't be satisfied with a goodness born merely of ego definitions. The highest virtue is to transcend the very thought of personal virtue in the realization of God alone as the doer. Before this realization, even the thought, I am kind or I am truthful, is self-limiting. As it says in the Bhagavad Gita, the 7th chapter, yet hard the wise Mahatma is to find, that man who saith, all is Vasudev. Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind.
Quegli ultimi versi della Bhagavad Gita dove dice pure è raro trovare un saggio Mahatma, l'uomo che dice tutto è Vasudev, è una traduzione poetica della Bhagavad Gita.
Is a poetic translation of the Bhagavad Gita. Whilst if you read, which I hope you will do, the essence of the Bhagavad Gita, you will see that the translation there is more prosaic. Yogananda often used this more poetic translation when he was talking to the public. All is Vasudev, all is Vasudev. And that is very special to us because Vasudev is a name of God. And it is also a very important mantra on the path of Kriya Yoga. And we will come back to that with this phrase, all is Vasudev. That can be useful to us. What is important to note is that he says, yet hard the wise Mahatma is to find, that man who say it, all is Vasudev. So if you don't say all is Vasudev and you have arrived this high state of consciousness, then you can already be a sage, because he says it is rare to find a wise, because I don't think an ignorant man would say this. So when are you a sage? When are you wise? When are you a Mahatma? I think it's when we start searching, when we start desiring wisdom. We read with Premi later the ceremony of light, and which describes the soul's journey through space and time. And the first phase is the revolt, and then there is the search, and then there is redemption. That's these phases in our journey. And the first two phases, revolt and search, sometimes we are confused. You are already wise in a certain sense because you desire, because you have understood that in order to live well, you need to understand how life works and what doesn't. And that is already a step, that is already when your heart asks this question to the universe, then the universe, which is much more intelligent than us, starts answering and giving us small signals. Maybe in the beginning you will find a teacher with relative wisdom, but still a teacher. And I want to share something with you what my father once told me. In his late life, he was a man with great compassion in his heart for others. When he was young, he was maybe a little less refined, what he himself would say. So often, when we achieve a certain state of maturity on the path, it gets more easy to also talk about the past and the stupid things we have done, because it's so natural. We all, in how many lives, who knows, we have done stupid and ignorant things, and we have had many occasions to even seek them. So my father would tell that when he was young, he was a melancholic young man. That was a characteristic for the whole life. And he would blame for everything his parents. Many young people do this, and I think you might recognize it yourself when you're 14, 15, 16, then it's all a fault of the parents. There are also people who, even at 40, 50, 60, continue to say, it's my parents' fault or my genetic fault. So that doesn't really help much. But anyway, he was a young man, 16, 17. He liked to go to the library, and he finds there a Dutch writer and because I inherited his books, I also have read some of these books. He was an intellectual and a philosopher, and for a brief period of time, he became my father's teacher, so to say. And I also read some of his books. He wrote very well. He was very clear, far too intellectual, but you could feel behind his writing also a need for purity and truth. And he was also quite polemic. So the way he would write about other writers or intellectual, he did not practice kindness, how we try to do here. So he did not do that. So in that period of time, my father saw a light. He was young, but his parents, who even were more ignorant than him, because he found this writer, his parents would not accept him. So what happened is that my father became quite difficult in the household. That's what my father told. So they had a discussion or a difficult time with his parents. So he told me once there was no water in the house, and everyone was trying to fix it, and my dad would go look and then go back and read his favorite author. And that is a mixture between ignorance but also a need for purity, and it helps us understand how practical a spiritual path should be, because I can understand things. I read, for example, I can read the autobiography of a yogi and be super enthusiastic, but then the result is that I become untreatable for the people around me. Then there is something that you still haven't understood. You need to expand, understand better. Also, Swami Kriyananda himself says that when he was still searching, he once wrote a long letter to his mother, scolding her for her poor spirituality. And then when he told us this story, he said, how could I be so terrible and do such a thing to my mom? But it's a phase in our search. How can I say? It's a little bit like the little bird that we will read about later in the ceremony. We are still searching, but there's already a little wisdom in us, because this little bird also wants to understand, seeks wisdom. There's also in the autobiography of a yogi an example of how complete our search for God needs to be. And that example is the stealing of the cauliflower. When Yogananda brings to his guru Sri Yukteswar 3 or 4 cauliflowers, and he says, I cultivated these cauliflowers, these vegetables for you with all my love, like a mother would cultivate, look after her children. And these are for you, master. And the master says, oh, well, put them in your room, and later we will cook them when our guests come. So after Sri Yukteswar calls Yogananda to go for a walk on the beach, and Yogananda forgets, unfortunately, to lock the door of his room. That is typically Sri Yukteswar. When you forget to lock, for example, this is so typical. When you forget to lock your car, then it might be stolen, for example, in Rome. So even in little things of life, this often happens. So this is one of the more comical stories of the book, where this weird, strange man enters into the ashram and runs out with 1 or 2 cauliflowers, and he's so happy about his new possession of the cauliflower. And Yogananda is very angry and wants to run after this man to block him. And Sri Yukteswar laughs and says, let him go, that is your punishment, because he didn't care a lot. You didn't care enough about little things. And what Yogananda says is the same that what Jesus says, that our wisdom needs to overcome our justice, our righteousness, needs to overcome the righteousness of the scribes and Pharisees. Otherwise, we will not enter the kingdom of heaven. And Yogananda says, even in the little things, most little things, we need to try to be aware in everything. Otherwise, we can be wise, but we cannot say that all is Vasudev. Vasudev, yes, when you're enthusiastic, when you're reading a book, autobiography of a yogi, when you have a nice meditation, when you participate in a chanting evening, when you go for a walk in nature, then you can say, yes, all is Vasudev. But if then you come back home and your partner does something that you don't accept, and you get angry, then all of a sudden it's not all Vasudev. Your partner is not Vasudev anymore. There are these stories about someone who goes meditate every time, every day. And if we understand that in truth, mediocrity that covers everything, also prosaic details of our material life and so on, the genius on the spiritual path has nothing to do with what you do. even nothing to do with your talents, with your position in your community. There are people in our community who are not teachers nor ministers, or maybe they don't even ask that, and you don't see them much around in public life. And for me, they are my reference points, inner reference points. Jesus says the scribes and Pharisees, they receive the applause of the people. But if you start practicing all is Vasudev, then you don't need the applause of others. It doesn't matter to you what others think or don't think of you, because inside you feel the support of the universe. You feel the power, such a true and authentic power that you don't need anything else. In practice in general, people will come to you. They will feel nourished by you, but not by your genius, by your talent, but only because they feel something in you, a nourishment that they also want to have. There was in at a certain point in my life, in high school, I changed my school. First, I would go to a public high school, and when I was 16, I chose to go to a Catholic high school, even though I didn't have any religious upcoming. But even though I was quite untreatable when I was 15, 16 years old, I was already searching for something. And I thought maybe a Catholic church with true priests would. I also had a big ego, maybe I still have it, but somehow they were individualists in this school, and they expressed a certain intensity which made me understand that they felt inside what they meant. Or that was in the public high school, the big egos. Whereas in the Catholic school, the students would talk about social equality, and I was touched by that because I thought it was mediocrity, because it did not give me fulfillment for my soul either. So I didn't find it in that school either. So to finish, this Vasudev, we are already Mahatmas, we are already wise because we are here, because we desire, because we ask the question to the universe, take to this vibration, to these masters, then try to complete your attunement, accepting their guidance, and prepare for Kriya Yoga. Kriya Yoga is the science and art, in my experience, and I think in the experience of all who practice Kriya Yoga. It is the most powerful practice for evolvement, and this practice will change you from inside. It is not easy, but why should it be easy? So it is really a powerful practice. Another thing that we can do is using all is Vasudev as a mantra. The mantras, to say all is Vasudev, the power of a mantra. Every time something happens to you that you don't like, and you feel the reaction coming up in you, you say to yourself, within yourself, all is Vasudev, all is God's will. That is not fatalism. That is not to say, oh, this is God's will, I cannot do anything about it. That is not the same. To say all is Vasudev, accepting and wanting to grow, trying to understand the plan of evolution. That is so important. Also the crisis of evolution that we are having now. For example, in East Europe, we have a crisis of evolution because the signals that said there's something going wrong, and these signals have not been understood, have not been seen. And that is what Yogananda said. You have to care and take care of little things. And that's difficult. You need to have a lot of awareness. Also in a relationship, or in relationships in general, in a community, for example, you need to understand in time when something is not going well and ask then for guidance, communicate, act with guidance. Then there will not be a crisis, but there will be a plan. And if we don't do that, the crisis will break out. It can be a little fight or it can be a war. But why did I get here? Oh, yes. In order to say all is Vasudev, saying all is Vasudev means accepting that there's a divine plan, accepting to be educated through life's experiences, to accept that life is a battlefield where I might die as a soldier, where I might fight through my health to evolve. I will grow through people who don't understand me, who criticize me. Try to say, Vasudev, what are you teaching me here? All is Vasudev. Another thing that we can do is to let go those things that we are attached to. That is a daily exercise for people on the spiritual path, because if I am too attached to things, I feel myself, my desires, the fear of losing. But if I let go, then Vasudev can enter into my life and I feel him. The non-attachment is the queen of yogic rules, and it's a very difficult practice. So let's do it with sincerity, with patience, with joy. The last thing, not beautiful thing that we can do on the spiritual path is to realize and to distinguish between love and desire. Love, and I read that by chance a little time ago. Every time that we overcome the limit of our ego, then there is space for love. And this is a poem by Yogananda that I will read first in Italian and then in Hindi, which is the redemption. And I wish you all a beautiful journey.